I'm so grateful today to be in conversation with Dr. Tom Webber and Julio Medina as we continue the conversation about the late great Bill Webber, and his legacy as a prophet, celebrating prophets for the cause of justice. So I just want to really start with Dr. Tom Webber, who is Bill Webber's son. Just tell us a little bit about how you saw your father. We know that the nation really celebrated him for all the work that he accomplished as a social justice advocate. But can you tell us your experience of him as your father?
Sure. But let's start by saying, please call me Tom. My dad always asked people to call him Bill. He wasn't comfortable with Professor Webber or President Webber or Dr. Webber. He thought that we were all just Tom and Lakeesha. So for this, call me Tom. I like the title, but Dad was a moral example to me and to the rest of our family. He was one of the people in my life that I've ever met that walked what he believed. He walked the walk. He didn't just talk about it. And so for most of my life, I've tried to use him as an example, think about what Dad would have done in such and such a situation. And I think he would be comfortable with being called a prophet. He hated to be called a martyr or a saint, but prophet I think he would have been okay with, because he was always trying to be out front. He was always trying to prophesy what the next big cause was, who was most in need in our society, and that's where he wanted to be. So yeah, I didn't decide to be a minister, but I think my brothers and sisters and I all became part of trying to make this world better. Teachers, social workers, health worker. So yeah, he was our male role model.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit? You talked about him walking the walk. I remember a conversation that you and I had last fall, and you talked about how serious he took this call, to the extent that you all actually relocated. He relocated his family to a different part of the city. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's right. He came out of World War II. He thought he went away to be on a destroyer escort. He was going to be a lawyer when he came back. He got a call from God sitting on the deck of the boat, and he felt he had called to be a minister. And when he came back, he was at Union Theological Seminary. I believe it was his second year, and he read an article in the New York Times that East Harlem on 100th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue was the worst street in all of America, not just New York, the worst street in all of America. So he turned to two of his classmates and said, that's where we have to start our church. If that's the worst place, that's where people need us the most, more deaths, more prostitution, more drugs. That's where the church should be. We should start our ministry there. So he and two other seminary students went and checked out 100th Street, and they all decided that to have a real ministry, they needed their families to live and work in the same community. So Dad moved us into the projects on 102nd Street, Washington houses. We were the only white family in our building. Quite an experience. But I even wrote a memoir called East Harlem White Boy, because that's how I sort of identify now. Wow. Growing up in East Harlem as a white boy was probably the most important experience of my life.
Wow. And we know that he had a love for criminal justice reform, and started this certificate program at Sing Sing Correctional Facility that led to the development of a master's of professional development. And so can you talk a little bit about his love for Sing Sing and the MPS program?
I think if I was ever jealous of anybody in my life, it would be the guys in Sing Sing, because Dad talked about them a lot more than he talked about me and my brothers and sisters. As I said before, he was always looking for the next frontier of where the church should be. And in the late 60s, I think, early 70s, he really saw the men and women incarcerated in this state and around this country were really the most in need of counseling, of a presence, of hope. And that's what he wanted to bring to them. That's where I first met Julio. Right, Julio? I think he was still there.
That's right. That's right. I was. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
That's right.
And it was he just talked about you guys all the time. You were like his sons, man. All he wanted to talk about.
Yeah, he's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for bringing Julio into the conversation. So I've heard you tell many stories about Bill Webber, and certainly your conversation when he helped you to kind of see your life in a different view than you had previously been able to see. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, and thank you all again for this opportunity. Well, you talk about Bill. Where does one begin? I mean, it's and I speak when I tell these stories, Dr. Walton. I speak on behalf of so many other men whose life he touched, as Tom mentioned. I'm just one of thousands of men that his life. He kind of just said he sees something special in us that we didn't see in ourselves at that time, and Bill made us see that. He saw the goodness in us when we couldn't see it. And I was in Sing Sing. I ended up serving 12 years in prison, and I was fortunate enough to get into this master's degree program. And I'll never forget, Bill taught foundations of ministry. And, I think the first thing we had to do is memorize Ephesians 4:11 through 17. That was the first kind of homework assignment. I'm like, why am I memorizing this? And of course, it made all the sense in the world, right? The gifts he gave, that some may be prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, for building up the body of Christ. And it goes on. But, when we think about that and we thought about the gifts that we all bring, we started recognizing that even in our differences, there's so much that we can do together. And it was one class that Bill talked about those differences and asked us to describe ourselves. And again, this is one of those opening classes, and I'm like, okay, I'm a dope dealer. Unfortunately, I polluted my communities, and I went to other communities, and I had a lot of people working for me. And, the unfortunate reality of what I was describing was what brought me to prison. And I didn't know how to talk about it, and I'm just going through the motions of it. So he's what is that? The hermeneutics of interpretation. Bill was the master at that. So he's like, you're bilingual. You went to these different communities and started something different. So he said, wow, you sound like a community organizer. And for the first time. I was called something different. For the first time, I was looked at as someone that was different. Of course, I had to go up and look what a community organizer was, and did. But I'm walking around the prison after that class like I'm a community organizer now, and it's just this feeling that Bill brought that just made us all light up. And I mean, Tom, you know this, you're a kid, but he was one of those guys that he could not see us for the crimes we committed, for the unfortunate, things we did in our community. Bill saw the God in us. He saw this light in us that allowed all of us, and I don't talk about myself, all of us to learn so much from him, for all of us to come out, he wanted us to be wounded healers, Henry Nouwen was one of the books that we had to read. And, we were coming back to these communities to heal the same communities we once destroyed. And I think Bill just epitomized what it means to be a prophet. And I always say, Bill did it when, mass incarceration wasn't sexy, right? I mean, we see all this now and what's taking place, it wasn't sexy back then when Bill was coming in. And not only did he come into Sing Sing, when we were transferred, he went to Attica, he went to Comstock, he went to Green Haven. Any prison you are in, Bill is visiting you. And I think that just epitomizes, Bill, his work, and what he meant to so thousands of men who went through New York Theological Seminary's master's degree program.
Julio, I just wanted to say that you brought up this idea of you being a community organizer. I think that Dad really thought that all ministers of the gospel should be community organizers.
There we go.
You don't just preach in your church. You get out there in the community. You organize your community. You try and become somebody that transforms folks outside the church window, not just inside the church window. That's what he taught his ministry. Even when he first started East Harlem Protestant Parish, every minister had a church, but they also had to have a vocation that they worked on, like working with drug addiction, working with housing, working with youth, something like that. It was part of the group ministry. You couldn't just preach the gospel. You had to be out there working with people in need. So you're a perfect example, man. And I remember, Lakeesha, you should know this, maybe you don't know it. Julio officiated at my dad's funeral. He and a man named Reverend John Collins.
Wow.
In the middle of the funeral, Julio says, "Okay, all you guys up there in the balcony." And there were like 300 men who'd been incarcerated. It was quite a tribute to my dad. Thank you, Julio.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Wow. Wow. What I hear as you all speak is a man who recognized that we are all, bigger than our worst mistake. We're better than our worst mistake. We're stronger, than our worst pain. And the fact that he was able to teach that as well as live that life is one of the reasons that I'm sure those 300 men were there honoring your father, who was serving them at a time when others weren't thinking about mass incarceration. And we're so proud. Of course, this is my first year as president at NYTS, but from the time I got there, I've been hearing nothing but great things about Bill Webber as well as Julio Medina. And so, Julio, can you talk a little bit about how your interaction with Bill Webber and the MPS program changed the trajectory of your life and led you to Exodus?
Sure. Thank you again. So we get into this program. It's a competitive program, as you know, Dr. Waldron, the MPS program. Competitive program. They take the top 15 throughout New York State prisons. We have to write an essay. So I'm going through the process, and I remember getting a letter from Bill saying, we have over 50 strong applicants. We're not sure you can make it in this year. I'm like, oh no, I got to get in this program, for all the wrong reasons initially, and I will tell you. So I'm like, I got to get into this program, So I kept writing Bill. Someone doesn't get transferred from Attica or something. I'm fortunate enough, I get into this program. When I say for all the wrong reasons, because the following year of that program, I was going to go to the parole board. So I said to myself, wow, wait a minute. Master's degree, parole board, this can get me home. So when I say all the wrong reasons, they were selfish reasons just for me trying to get out of prison. In month number 2, in October, and classes start September, in October, I realized that if I stayed in prison for the life sentence that I originally had, it wouldn't matter. Because this program provided an identity. It provided the reshaping of my own life, of my own narrative. And if I ever did get to the street, what can I do? And it was those classes, and particularly that Bill came to, that helped shape my view and my vision of life. Because it didn't matter if there was 10 inches of snow, Bill was showing up. Every other class would be canceled except Bill's.
Wow.
If the trains weren't running, Bill will get in his car, slide all over the roads, leave, 4 hours earlier, but he would be there with peanuts in hand. He would get peanuts from, as you know, Tom, when he would travel, back then they gave out peanuts on the airlines. And Bill was able to smuggle in all these peanuts to us. Yeah.
Yep.
But the shaping of the NYTS program, of that MPS, in month 3 and month 4, I realized that my calling was to serve God, and my calling was to do some form of ministry that involved the many men I were around in prison. Because people don't, unfortunately, get to see the goodness of people in prison. What you see is maybe what you hear on the news, or the smirk from the kid's face when he's 17 years old and he committed a crime. I got to see that person 5 years, 6, 7 years later. I got to see them begin to get their GED, maybe take a college course. The lights begin to go on. I got to witness transformation in God's work at its finest. Taking someone who probably had the roughest past in the world and creating this new specimen of life that can't, if you would hear some of the things, you wouldn't believe it's the same person. I got to witness that transformation. I got to witness that because Bill Webber was able to open my own eyes, was able to show me, Julio, there's goodness in you. And just as there's goodness in you, there's goodness in your brother, in your classmates. So, Dr. Waldron, for me, I think, the experience that allows me to do the work I do today is all shaped around the seminary. It's all shaped around that Sing Sing program. It's all shaped. And I want to say, Tom, I don't know if you remember this, but you were at Edwin Gould Academy back then.
Right.
And Tom was the director. And I met Tom, and this is when I was still trying to finagle my way out of prison. And when I met Tom, I said, hey, Tom, can I have a letter that I can work at Edwin Gould Academy when I go to the parole board? And sure enough, I woke up afterwards. But Tom had that letter.
And you never did come to work for me, though.
I never got there.
All right.
But
you sent Lonnie to work for me instead, right?
There you go. But that hope, Tom, that hope for someone inside, that hope to go around and show the other men, hey, listen, there's some value in me. This guy, Tom, sees something in me that no one ever seen. People like Bill, your dad, gave me something that no one ever saw before. And I think, excuse me. I don't sit in this chair alone. Bill is here. Bill, I've had some tremendous success, if you want to call it that. But that's all due to the Webber family. And I count you in that, Tom, as well. So I'm honored to have had, Bill take the time to believe in me and thousands of men that he's touched. I do this work, but there's so many others that can give you the same sentiment and the same testimony about Bill and the work that he's done and the lives that he's changed. And so many of us are running organizations or just great fathers, established families, helping our communities in any way we can. We are not, Dr. Waldron, as you know, that worst moment of our lives. But Bill provided the blueprint for us to help transform our lives.
Well, thank you.
I think that my father's legacy is really in you folks, Julio, you and all the other guys. Religious education, theological education, a place like New York Theological Seminary was really at the heart of what he wanted to do, how transform the world through other people. not through his own work, but through all the work that you guys do. It's truly amazing. And he did. You are his son.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that makes you my brother. You're my brother, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Definitely, Tom. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Julio, for sharing. We certainly can read about the impact of Bill Webber's life, but to hear it firsthand and the difference that he made in your life certainly helps me to understand the importance of this program, even as we think about the future. And certainly with everything that's going on in our country right now, with all of the protests that are happening all over the world, in recognition of the fact that Black lives matter, that all lives matter. It's even more important now than ever for us to continue this work and continue this legacy. This is a legacy that I'm living in, that I've walked into, and I certainly want to make sure to live up to that legacy. And we want to continue to ensure that the NPS program thrives at Sing Sing. We're looking to reestablish those certificate programs across other correctional facilities in the state of New York. And I really think it's a program that should be a national model of social justice and redemptive justice.
Yes.
And so as we continue to move forward and talk about expansion and look to have this program in a women's facility as well, because while we graduated over 412 men from the NPS program since 1982, which is when it started, we still have a lot of work to do, still have a lot of eyes to open. And so, Tom, I want to give you, the last word in terms of how important it is to you, to your family, and your extended family of thousands of men who've come through the certificate and this master's program, the importance of us continuing this program in the future, and how this program can really impact and change the lives of those who come into contact with NPS, started through your father, Bill Webber.
Yes, thank you. And Julio and Lakeesha, thanks so much for joining this conversation. I don't think there was any institution or program closer to my father's heart than York Theological Seminary, especially at this time in our history, with such racial divide, with such tension, with such also opportunity to really make a change in this world. We need NYTS more than ever. Dad would have wanted this program to continue, and I think under Lakeesha Walrond's presidency, it's going to get deeper, it's going to get stronger, it's going to influence and impact on more people, on more communities. And I would only ask everyone listening out there today, everyone watching this, go to nyts.edu and make a contribution, make a donation of whatever size, so that this incredible work, this transformative work, this redemptive, revolutionary work can continue. It would be the greatest legacy for my family, for my father, Bill, if we could continue and if NYTS could prosper and become even more impactful in the world as we proceed forward. So again, please go to nyts.edu and make a sizable contribution.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I just want to thank you and your family for your faithfulness to NYTS. We're so grateful for your generosity, as well as Julio and Exodus. Thank you so much for your continued generosity to our program. We recognize that every dollar matters. It makes a difference, and we appreciate all of our donors. And so we hope that you will take this opportunity to partner with us and to give, so that we can continue this program, that we can expand this program, that we can see this program giving birth to other programs in our state and even in our nation. We're so grateful to Bill Webber for his cause of justice, for him being a prophet, and for leaving us such a rich legacy. And it is our responsibility to continue that legacy, and I'm committed to doing that work. So thank you both again. We will continue to have these conversations as we continue to go deeper and deeper into this work. God bless you both. And we look forward to talking to you soon. Amen.
Amen.